Welcome to my Grand Slam Journey podcast. I decided to do a fun podcast experiment about 4 months ago. And due to life happening, I finally recorded my first episode with my friend and doubles partner, Julianna Gates. Julianna grew up in San Diego playing tennis. We met playing 10K tournaments in Mexico in 2007, and since then we kept in touch, visiting each other now and then, and sometimes planning fun activities, such as hiking the Half Dome this summer. During this podcast, we explore the beginnings of our tennis journeys, what it takes to be a professional tennis player, and tricks around mental toughness. We talk about the benefits of slowing down, visualization, productive versus unproductive thoughts, and awareness of our thoughts. We also explore how to rewire our brain to improve productivity and the power of reframing. Hope you enjoy the listen. What got you into tennis, and how would you reminisce on your tennis journey?
Wow, it's a big question. Okay, when I first played, the first time I ever played, I remember I was in preschool and it was just part of one of the activities. They had the pee-wee net, the little pee-wee racket, and basically I'm just volleying, trying to hit the foam balls. That was my first memory. I remember it was fun. I was trying to hit the foam balls. Once, they had it in that school year. And then I didn't think about it much until later when my dad took me out. That's the first time I would say that I actually tried to play. This was after my parents had divorced, and it was just something he could do with me. So he took me out and tried to play around, teach me a little bit, but he didn't know much. He was just a club player. He picked it up way later in life, just socially. So he wasn't really good or anything, but he could hit a little bit. So that was my first time. I think I must have been 9, because my parents divorced when I was 8. And then where I live with my mom, there's the court. And he took me to the court. So yeah, that was probably the first time I hit. So it was a happy memory. Yeah. And then slowly, time passed. I didn't play again until maybe a few years later. My dad was a member at a country club nearby. And then I think I took a lesson from one of the lady coaches once or twice. And then trying to remember how I remember taking a semi-private lesson with a girl, and I don't remember how I met her. My mom was friends with her mom or something. At that time, I was playing soccer, taekwondo, and playing tennis once a week. But definitely, I would say that coach had a bigger influence in me playing more. I think it was my mom. She didn't know much about tennis, so she started bringing me to more clinics. But I was having fun. And so then I was doing a clinic and a lesson each week for a little bit. And then it was when I was 12 and a half, I played a round robin tournament in Coronado, and I won it. I got first place.
Wow.
And I remember I beat my friend. She was at 2 grades above me. She'd gone to the same school as me, and she was crying. She was so upset. And I didn't understand what happened. I was just playing. I didn't even know I won, because at the end they add up all the games. So I was dude, I was just having fun playing, and also oh, first place. And then they give her second. She starts crying. And I was I remember I was just confused. I was what? This was fun. Why is she crying? What? They didn't really get the concept. Oh, I won the tournament, the round robin. It was a little tournament. So I remember wow, cool. I won a tournament. And then I played one I remember at the YMCA. I think was the next one I played. And then I think I won that one too.
Wow. Then, your first 2 tournaments, 2 wins.
Yeah, I think so. And then, and then I remember the coach saying to my mom, she could be really good at tennis, or she should just focus on one thing, because she's doing soccer, taekwondo, and tennis. And it was true. Even at that point, I was probably going to pick one thing anyway. I had done taekwondo since I was 7. Looking back though, you wonder oh, wow. I wonder if I would have stuck with taekwondo if I would have gone to the Olympics, because I'd done the Junior Olympics, and that instructor was basically gearing me to go to the Olympics. And I didn't know this till later. I didn't understand it. The adults really have such a big influence on your path. I don't know. I was just influenced by these people that were telling me stuff, that you're good at this and that. But I mean, I was it was something I actually enjoyed. It wasn't like I wasn't forced ever to go to taekwondo. I was never forced to play tennis. It's just interesting. The environment that you're in,
Yeah.
obviously dictates what you end up choosing or whatever. My dad was a good dad, but he was not the one taking me to tennis. So this coach took over. He was almost like overbearing.
Mm.
And to the point, honestly, yeah, I've never like shared too much, but yeah, he was like verbally abusive. Later, I could identify like, oh, wow, that's why I had low self esteem. Like a lot of belittling and negative, I would say, reinforcement. But I got very good. I was top 15 in Southern California for 3 years. I played national tournaments. I got recruited. I mean, looking back, I'm like wishing I had explored the other school options. But anyway, like I got recruitment letters from UCLA, Columbia, Princeton. I had all straight A's in high school. But again, my dad had never been through that with scholarships, with sports and college, and he was busy with his own life. I would see him, but he didn't know how to take me through that process. My
Right.
mom didn't know. She went to college in Mexico and law school in Mexico. Like I felt like I was just kind of on my own floating. But in the end, it was a mixture. It was a lot of positive. I would say more positive than negative for sure. It taught me a lot of tools for anything in life: mental toughness, discipline, dedication to something, commitment, and working towards something and then accomplishing it or meeting that goal. So
Yeah.
it did teach me a lot about discipline and self discipline because it is such an individual sport unless you're playing doubles all the time, which
Right.
when you're a junior, that's not really usually a focus. So I think it helped me a lot in that aspect and helped me with my school because I was self motivated to learn to do well in school. And that was always like normal to me.
Yeah.
I didn't realize like kids didn't do homework and kids didn't try in school. Like to me, I was like, I didn't understand that. And also, parents did have obviously good values they instilled and try your best. And my dad was never like, you have to get straight A's. He was never that kind of stern parent, but definitely he would say, like, oh, wow, you're getting straight A's. That's great. He would definitely bring it up. So I always wanted to do well in school.
Right.
But yeah, in the end, I did my recruiting trips to Purdue because I was looking at the top business schools at the time. Rewinding though, it was definitely a lot of looking back, a lot of the last years of like high school. Instead of doing what other kids would have been doing on that weekend or spending more time with family, I was up with groups of tennis kids, like going up to LA playing tournaments. And because when you do well, you got to go up the next weekend because it's two
Yeah.
weekends. And so it was a lot of time. I would say every other weekend I was playing tournaments for like a good 3.5 years. That's just how it is. But yeah, then I did recruiting trips to Indiana, Purdue, San Diego State. I was never that kid that was rebelling. There were a lot of kids like, oh, I can't wait to leave home. I was an only child. I liked my parents. I liked San Diego. I was really happy. So I never was like, I really want to leave San Diego. So then I ended up choosing San Diego State because they were offering me a full ride. But then the unexpected happened, like my senior year of high school, right at the end after I said I would go, my dad had a stroke. That also got in my head thinking like, wow, life's so short. I had an opportunity to financial like sponsorship and to travel and play right after high school if I wanted to, but originally the plan was at least go a year, then you could redshirt a year, play, or come back to school. But see, this is where it's like there's a lot to say who's your on in your corner. Who do you have greedy people around you? Do you have like people that have your best interests at heart or not? And unfortunately, at that time, the coach that I had did not. He was very greedy. I like found out a lot later. I was like distraught. My dad's like almost dying, and my mom doesn't know anything about the
Yeah.
college stuff like this and that. And so I was really influenced by the coach, like nudging me, like, "Oh, you should go play. You should go play." So I did, and of course, the San Diego State coach was furious with me because I backed out. But yeah, and I had a full ride. But I thought, oh, I can play a year or two and then come back. I don't regret anything. Like it's made me who I am, and the experiences, like I said, way more positive than negative. I mean, I got to travel and see the world and play tennis, and it was great at times. It was horrible at times. It's a roller coaster. It's a hard lifestyle, of course. It's not like I was traveling in a glamorous, like I wasn't top 10 in the world. I would train and then play a circuit, come back, train. And I did that for like 2.5 years. The first year was awesome. Everything was new and exciting. Second year was a little tougher. I was still enjoying it. Third year, I hit a wall because, again, there's a lot to be said with having a support system, the right people. It was really hard at the last year, especially. I did everything on my own.
Yes.
The flight, the practice courts, the hotel, the picking the tournaments. Just once you're there, the rental car, you name it, everything. Trying to find courts to practice, trying to find people. A lot of people are not very nice. Like it was really hard. I wish I'd had just a little more positive support that last year. And like the coach I'd had totally dropped me because he wasn't getting paid anymore. So it was obviously all about money because like, then he wouldn't even talk to me. So it was just, wow, this whole time, it was just bad guidance. But in other ways, I said, I don't regret anything. However, I was definitely burnt out by that last year. And which is ironic because I was playing some of the best tennis of my life. That summer when I quit, to give an example, not that it is what it is. Like, I remember in practice, I was playing a circuit in the US. And this is practice, I get it. But I beat a player that had gone to UCLA like very easily. Then a month later, she's freaking in the third round of the US Open. But I had quit because I was just so, yeah, probably like depressed that last year. I don't know. Like everything just seemed overwhelming. It was just a lot. It's really hard,
Yeah.
but it can be really cool. So I'm like, I'm just going to, go back to school. I'm not in the top 10. I've given it 2.5 years or whatever it was, 3 years, whatever. And then I could have technically, I guess, played a year on scholarship at San Diego State, but I was so burnt out because remember, mind you, I don't know if you experienced this, but when you really look at it, it's basically been from 13 and at that point 22 or whatever of your whole life, not whole life, but a big part of it. It's like you're training, you're constantly thinking about your tennis and this and that, and it's all about that. That's like your life focus or majority. I did have other things in my life. When I was traveling, I did take online classes, so it wasn't like I wasn't doing anything as far as education, but it's different. My focus was tennis and training and this and that and fitness. So it was like it's a big shift. So I decided to just go back to school, but I had no desire to play or to see a racket, to see a court for like a year. But yeah, it was quite the journey.
Yeah.
And then I went back to school to study business. But at that point, I didn't want to play like competitively.
Yeah, I mean, it's super hard, right?
Oh, and at that time, the rules were different. NCAA, like people like, oh, you could play, like maybe you could play at Stanford, maybe this, because like all these people still thought highly of me and my playing, but I was like, the thought just did not even appeal. And they're like, oh, you can appeal the rules, you can appeal. I was like, this sounds like so much of a headache. Like at the time, the rules were way different. For every year you were out, you lost a year of eligibility, but I guess you could try and fight it. Now it's different. Now you can accept some of the travel money and whatever I made didn't not in any way equal out like what was spent. So there's no way, it wasn't like I was making a living off of it. So that's kind of like lame to say that was professional because it was not. To me, you're making a living and that was just not even covering the expenses, whatever I accepted. But at that time, I would have to do this lengthy process and I just didn't want to do it. Right. That's why I didn't play in college. But yeah, I did have full rides at Division I schools after high school.
It's a hard decision. I remember I didn't want to go to US to college either. And I remember a lot of my friends at the time. So if you weren't good enough where everybody wasn't betting on you 100%, you can make it. They were looking for the full ride scholarships. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go try it for half a year. If I don't like it, I can always come back. But I remember the decision is super hard. And also often what you mentioned, a lot of people don't realize the burnout or the grit that you have to put every day or even just traveling the tournaments, actually orchestration, everything around it is the almost more tiring part than playing the tournaments themselves. And given if you have to travel by yourself, it adds up so much. It's not really stress, but it's like mental drain of the ticket and the bus and the how do I get from this room to there?
Yeah.
Where am I gonna sleep?
The first year or two, like it was nice. I found like someone that sometimes we'd split the fee for the hitting partner, or like when I went to Australia, I split it with this other girl, Elizabeth Coffey, for a trip. Sometimes, or I knew certain people were going that I'd finally befriended, but it took 1.5 years to befriend some people that I knew were going to go. But even then, you don't know if they're going, they can flake on you. But the
Like,
first years were a little easier because of that. But then the last year was like literally all by myself. So yeah.
yeah. And then it's also hard in a way I found on the tour to really find friends.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think it's just the nature of it because you're competing
Very
against each
cutthroat.
other.
Yeah.
And so you both are after the same thing. And then even if you find a real friendship, then you have to, if you have a
Like
draw, you have to play against the girl. It's so
yeah.
hard to eliminate
Balance it.
emotions, or it's like, oh, it's my girl, but my friend, but then you're supposed to play the same way. Like that was always hard for me.
Yeah, same. Yeah. But I experienced, yeah, that the traveling, like people were not very nice. Like you said, very cutthroat. And I'm not expecting everybody to be like, oh hi, I'm not, but it was a very, yeah, it was definitely at first like, whoa, maybe a little bit of a shock for me because I hadn't experienced that so much. I've experienced like cheaters and this and that in Southern California tennis. But like that was a whole other level of like, whoa, these people really don't give a bleep about like, wow, they're not very nice at all.
Yeah.
Like just pretty bad. But not everyone. I did meet nice people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was far and few between as far as like trying to like people that you feel like you could even practice with and work together a little bit. Which to me it's funny, it's like you should be. I mean, we're all there to everyone needs to practice, everyone needs it's just people are really cutthroat.
Yeah, yes. You reminded me actually how hard it was to even find people to hit with and
Yeah.
between
Yeah, and
tournaments.
then when you're traveling, you have to keep up your fitness and then like but I mean I usually would do this like a circuit of 3 tournaments, come back. I
Right.
wasn't traveling all the time. It wasn't like so luxurious. So sometimes I was home a month or two and then I'd go play again because I was
Yeah.
on a budget, of course. But I mean, all in all, though, I definitely, learned a lot about myself, learned about just the world, just traveling, even like going to Turkey, going to different places, Poland, England, Spain, Portugal, Japan, Philippines. So, it was definitely an eye opening experience. It was also a very cool experience and it was also a very tough experience. It was like, it had everything pretty much
Yeah.
of what you would expect to encounter when you travel like that. I did really enjoy going to a new country and learning about the culture, and that whole part was to me really a fun aspect of it.
Yeah.
Just expanding perspective and meeting other people from like that are not from the US or not from because I was in a bubble like growing
Yeah.
up in San Diego, everything's like sunny and happy and great. It's
Yeah.
like
It's a great city, San Diego. Yes.
but
But I mean, the US is a big country on its own.
yeah,
So there's a lot of tournaments here. But the traveling around internationally is definitely the fun part. And I actually wonder how much that really shaped me wanting to have different friends or different cultures and traveling around the world because I just love
yeah,
cultural shock. Like if someone tells me, oh, let's go for vacation here, or even Hawaii, I was like, I love Hawaii.
yeah,
Hawaii is super fun, but it's too American. It's an
yeah,
for me, vacation is vacation when I go out to somewhere completely different, experience different people, different language, different food. And that's
yeah.
what I really enjoy. And I feel like I'm getting this new experience.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the part that was really exciting and fun for me. That I think that's why I kept going for a little longer than like instead of just doing it a year and a half and deciding. I decided after like 2.5 years, whatever, and 3 years, I was like, okay. I just I wasn't in the top 10, and then I wasn't. It was stressful. You have to get sponsorship money and budget and it was just time. I was not happy either. So that's
Right.
when I decided to go back to school. But I'm glad I tried it. I would have always wondered if I didn't. The only thing that always like in the back of my mind was like, if I hadn't had like that influence, that coach, like kind of deciding when I was in a very like vulnerable space with my dad being sick, all this stuff. I wonder what would happen had I gone to San Diego State that first year and then try to play, that's obviously the smarter route. But also when my dad had the stroke in my head, I was like, wow, life is so short. Why don't I just go now? School's always there, which is true too.
Yes.
So there was no wrong answer. It's just interesting. Different experiences. But now I think the rules have changed a lot at the NCAA. Like players can accept more money and things like that if
Yeah,
they
I
do clear.
understand that. And that's certainly positive. I also think tennis
Yeah,
won also for sports. I think like the football, right, and basketball, where they really drafted the big leagues. And I think partly a lot of those players do get some sort of advertisement because the schools do get a lot of money from those players who play. So I actually think that is
right.
super encouraging.
Yeah, that's true. What about for you? How did you first start playing? Do you remember? Did your parents play?
No, my dad played similar like yours, just to sort of, he picked it up
Yeah.
late. Tennis was sort of, I would say, the noble type of sport in Czech. Like back in the day, especially when it was the communist era, not everybody was able to play tennis. So
Yeah.
I think after the revolution, my mom has been always like, I want to do what I couldn't do. So
Uh,
after that they started going and making friends who actually, my mom had friends who played tennis. So how I started was she just paid one of her friend's son, actually, who was also just self-taught. He would
yeah.
pick me up from my grandma's and grandpa's house, and we would bike over to the park to play tennis once a week. And he would try to teach me.
Hmm.
And then there was a yearly tournament in the city where I grew up in that I would play. And right before the tournament, we actually went to Croatia. And Croatia, my mom decided to actually invest money, and there was a coach that I would play every day that week. And
Oh
so
wow.
it was almost like a tennis boot camp. And then I came back, and my mom, oh my God, you trained so hard. You should be good and ready to win now. So I didn't win that tournament, but it kind of shows we totally didn't know what tennis is or any professional sport is or
Yeah.
doing professional sport. So we had to learn from the ground up to, oh, there are tournaments in our city, and oh, there are tournaments in the area where we live, and then there are tournaments in the whole Czech Republic, and then it grows to Europe and the world, and you kind of get to understand the whole circuit and
Right.
how to train. So it was all of that actually for us was a learning. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
interesting how, like, you think back, even like you the little tiny steps. It seems like it's never something like I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a top tennis player. I think
Right.
I had it in my mind at some point. There was these little tiny steps that it just kind of evolved on its own
Exactly.
to
Yeah,
where
that was
you don't
yeah.
even know, like, it became a path even unknowingly, sort of, right? You kind of did
Yeah.
these little things over and over, and suddenly, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing now every day,
Yeah.
365 days a
It
year.
evolved into that. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, and of course there was I enjoyed it because that's why I kept doing it. I wouldn't have done it to majority of it.
but
Yeah, and it was like you said, it's like the local tournaments turned into like, oh, Southern California tournaments, sanctioned tournaments. I remember it was one big breakthrough in a tournament. I was like 13 and a half. And then I was top 15 Southern California. And all of a sudden, like, oh, you can go to super nationals, the national tournaments.
yeah.
I was like, oh, cool. I want to do that. And zonals. And oh my gosh. Oh, do you know the Big Bang Theory?
Yes, I love Big Bang Theory.
So, okay, do you know Kaylee Cuoco, the actress? She's
Mm-hmm.
in that one. She was on my zonal team in Delray Beach, Florida. This is before she obviously was. It was just funny. Yeah, she was on my zonal team because every section, like Southern California,
Yeah.
Texas, like has a team competition when you're
Wow.
a junior. There's this event called zonals, and I was for the girls 14 zonals at that time. I got invited to go, which was like I guess a big deal. I went to Delray Beach, Florida, and then she was on my team. Just
Wow.
like what a small world. And then I think I played her one time, and I don't know if I was 14 or whatever. And then I think after that she quit tennis. She quit because I beat her. So no, I'm kidding. No. But I remember I did play her and I did beat her. But no, I remember she was going to audition. She was like trying to act because
Oh,
I didn't know her, but I knew her through people or whatever.
yeah.
And it's just such a small world. But then yeah, she quit tennis and then became a big time actress. But good for her. But
Wow.
it's just
Well,
like weird. trivia.
Obviously, the acting was a better choice for her, so that's great.
Yeah, seems like it really paid off with the
Yeah.
success.
What is
But
zonal
again,
actually? What is that?
zonal, so it's a team competition. They had different sections went to different played against other sections. So like Southern California, the whole thing, they picked a few players to represent Southern California for
Okay.
that age division, and then you play against other sections of the country,
Oh, nice.
other states basically.
Yeah.
So it's like a big team thing, and yeah, it was pretty fun. But yeah, like all of a sudden I did that, and then all of a sudden it was like what you were saying, one thing led to another. And then yeah, it really probably wasn't until I was then 15 going to high school, like, oh wow, yeah, that's a good goal. Like, yeah, getting a full ride, like that became kind of the goal along the way. It sounded good. I'm like, oh well, yeah, and I enjoy playing. Why not? Yeah, and that was the goal for like 3 years to
Yeah.
get a full ride. It's interesting reminiscing, but yeah. So for you, same thing, right? You play tournaments, and then did you ever play ITF junior tournaments?
Yeah, I played so there was the ETA, right? The ETA are 14, the European Tennis Association. They're 14 and 16 and under, I believe, as well. But then the
Yeah,
ITFs, I played the 18 and under, maybe since I was even 15, 16.
yeah,
And then right at the time, I think at a similar point, I started playing the women's circuit, maybe 17, 18. Yeah, from 17 to around 20. And then there was sort of the breaking point is like, how much longer do I
yeah,
play? And like the odds of making it, right?
yeah,
Very slim. I wanted to continue playing actually, but then my mom was more, well, just try it out. You can always come back. So I was prepared to come to the US and for only for 6 months. And then
yeah,
I suffered through the first 6 months. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go back, finish the first year. And I actually did really good my freshman year. So I ended up getting to nationals. I played at Stanford. I believe I finished around top 40, Division One.
that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, and so that obviously doing great really encouraged me to stay. I was like, well, what is next? What if I just stay and continue? It was actually quite appealing to me. Like in college, I think in
yeah,
a way I lost the stress of the money and the funding because
yeah. That's
I just have to train. I have coaches and they train
in a
with
way it's
me.
easier. It's set up for you. That's what I remember a lot. Now that you bring that up, the first year I wasn't year and a half, that didn't cross my mind, even though I knew it was there, but it wasn't hitting me. It was
Right.
towards the end of that second year when money started coming up, like budget and like this is how much is being spent, like how much longer is it going to take for you to make money? It's like, whoa, then I started really feeling the stress that third year.
Yeah. It's really hard. I think the money, the obligation, I think for me personally was the hardest. And if I even now like realize, oh my God, how much money did my tennis cost? I feel
Well,
like
me too. Looking back, I'm like,
I'm not sure why my parents paid for it.
well, that's what I was saying. I'm like, oh my gosh, all that.
But obviously they saw something in me that they wanted to give me that opportunity. But
Same.
it's crazy how expensive it is. And often people don't realize actually the tennis and the expense. I think one
Yeah.
is the coaching and another one is the travel. I think that what drives most the money and the budget, right? Because in order to be good,
Yeah.
the more tournaments you play, the better off you are because you have more chances of getting more points.
Yeah. It is contingent on your sponsorship, your money, your backing to a big degree. But yeah, it's like the same. I think my dad, he grew up super poor in Indiana, like never played tennis, was in the Navy to help pay for some college. And then once his GI Bill ran out, he was studying communications, and his story is pretty cool. It was pretty inspiring. But to me, as far as like putting the hard work, because he was always about like, oh, you put the time in, you get the reward. Like he was all like a hard worker mentality, old school. He thought communication was so cool. Like he wanted to be an announcer and all that stuff. And so he slowly worked his way up in LA. Like he knew nothing. He got fired from his first job. Like he did a horrible job announcing like a football game. And then he slowly got experience. And eventually he was like I remember when I was little, I didn't get what he was saying until later. I'm like, oh, that's what he meant. Because, when you're 8, 9, he's telling you these things. I'm like, he's like, oh yeah. And then I was a disc jockey in Hollywood. And I was like, okay, whatever, dad. Like, and then later when I was 12, like, wait, disc jockey, you mean DJ? Because like before it was like the radio, the disc jockey actually played the record. So he was a disc jockey apparently in Hollywood or LA for a while. And then I guess at some point he slowly worked his way into the marketing side of radio. Like he got into radio and television. He at one point did like a ad lib, like kind of like now the evening talk show, like they talk ad lib, like in the moment, spur of the moment, talking to people passing by. He had like some kind of show like that with where he was just like talking to random people and ad libbing and just making interesting conversations with random people on the street that he ran into. And then he got into, so radio, television was his like passion, communications. Then he eventually got into you move up and you got to realize, there's a lot of money in this. I think it was just a natural progression. I think he liked still being on the air, but I don't know if it was just because he was married and had a family.
Yeah.
Not us. He was married before. Also, he got into like the sales part, the marketing and sales part of like a radio station, and so he would sell airtime, and that was like a big deal back then. What I guess the equivalent of now online, the ads and the banners and whatever, all that kind of stuff. But at that time, that was like a big moneymaker. So he did sales and marketing, and then eventually he managed a radio station or two, and then eventually he owned a few radio stations. So he really worked his way up. And but yeah, his big passion was radio and television and communications and broadcasting. But anyway, so I knew him later, like he's now at that point retired when he came into our lives. So, but he would talk about it all the time. And I think to him, because I was doing well in school, he always, I guess, didn't do well in school because he had a lot of responsibility. He had to work, and he was just like super excited that I was doing well in tennis because, he never had that opportunity. He was playing when he was young. And so I guess he really supported it. He saw that I was putting the time in. That's why he was supportive of it and working towards it.
Actually chatting yesterday with a couple of our friends, like the self-drive, right? Going back to at the beginning, what you mentioned, like you've always had that in you. And I resonate with that. Ever since I was a kid, I remember not the want of winning, but almost the fear of losing and being worse being last. I don't know if that's a positive, but that really fuels me. I just hate sucking.
I hated it too. I hated that more than
This weekend we were watching the CrossFit Games, and obviously it's the fittest on earth. Although this year they're very small because of COVID, so I believe there's only 6 people, men, women competing, but they're still crazy fit. So it was the one thing that Rich Froning, pretty much, there was a clip and he was saying, I'm not sure if I like winning as much as I hate losing.
Yeah.
So that's it.
That resonates. Yeah, I hated losing.
I just hate losing. I always feel like, going back to tennis, that if I was better at losing, I could have been a better tennis player. Like that's something that I have in my mind. Like when I go back, because in tennis, you really, mostly, unless you were top, and until you get to the top, you typically lose more than you win.
Yeah.
And you make a lot of unforced errors. Like going back to mental toughness, and you have so much time to be on the court with yourself and your own thoughts.
Yeah.
So the amount of energy and the mindfulness you need to influence your thoughts. I was like, I missed this ball. What am I going to do to not do the same mistake? That's number one. But then how do you going to gain the courage and just the positive mindset to actually still trust in yourself that you can make the next point? And that's on the B scale, right? Then you scale it up. It's
right.
I've always been my worst mental enemy, and like I wonder the fear of losing. Yeah, what really drove me to work hard. I always been a workhorse, and I put in the effort and training, but the competition is something that always made me nervous. Were you a natural competitor, or how were you trained?
For me, I played better in tournaments. So I guess I was, it didn't just happen suddenly. I think I was lucky to have had some training, like the mental toughness. Like I remember this guy coming to the club that I was and talked about mental toughness and things you can do. So I think in that sense, like I had some tools. I'm not saying I was great, but I really did like I feel like I played better usually. I wasn't perfect. Like I'm sure I still choked here and there, but overall though, I tended to play better in tournaments than practice, like as far as matches. So I guess I learned some strategies, but I had a big influence with my dad and like just being reminded that you don't need two enemies on the court. Like you already have an opponent. You don't need two opponents. He was really big on like mantras and talking to yourself and the mental side of things. So I learned some of that from my dad, learned some from other coaches that I was lucky enough to hear, oh, wow, like take your time. You need to breathe and walk back. Little things that added up to helping me refocus when I would be off. I'm like trying to think back. I don't think I ever really totally lost it during matches as far as getting upset. But I think that came with time though. I think that was because like I played a lot of matches in practice where I did, and maybe had an attitude and, called out on it. What are you doing? Like you're when you react like that, they love it. Like your opponent loves it. And being told by coaches in practice, hey, like that's not helping you, and giving tips, but the whole mental side. I mean, that's everything. It's a big part of it. So being able to, I remember at one point someone came in, was talking about visualizations. To me, that was like mind blowing. I'm like, what? That was like a game changer. Right. So then I started visualizing. I remember, I think it was when I was 16 or something, like play the whole first set in your head. I was like, what? Like, no, like the night before or something, or that morning. I'm like, no, like, so I started slowly, like starting with a few points or a game in your head, already play it. You have to be able to visualize it. And then it became like applying it. Okay, visualize where you're going to serve before you bounce. Like as you're bouncing, visualize it. So you already do it twice. In your head, you have an idea and then you serve it. There's a lot to it. The mind.
Yes.
Keeping it on course, redirecting it, not letting yourself blow up at your own self because you have high expectations of yourself because you want to do well. It's a whole other world, the mental side.
I actually think for me, the mental toughness or the mental, I don't know, toughness. I guess I consider myself tough, but I guess who doesn't?
Right. I know.
I think everybody does anyway, but the mental, more of control was the hardest thing for me, like cultivating the trust and believing in myself.
That was hard for me too.
Like,
that was something.
I do still remember you've always had this calmness about you. Like even when I met you, I don't know, maybe you really practice it. When I go back to your story, you really seem to be a natural competitor. Because if you go back to like how you started, you seem like, oh, this is just really fun. I'm enjoying the game. I'm not here to win. I just really kind of like being in it and hitting the ball. Like,
I really did.
And then I remember even when I met you, we played doubles. And even now, like you were seem like optimist and very calm about things. Like whatever stories you tell me with your crazy roommates or anything,
oh yeah.
I know. What happened. I'll just move on and I might as well stress over it anymore. Do you feel like that's an attitude you've kind of had, or because of the training?
I think it is because of the conditioning. Like no joke. Because I mean, I just specifically remember, like, I don't know which coach. Again, it's all I did take from different coaches or was around different coaches that were some very good coaches. Like at one point, I was lucky enough to go for like a week to the Everett's Academy and got really good coaching by like top collegiate coach Andy Brandy. And like I was on the court with Chris Everett one day. She came to practice and gave tips to her brother. Went to Saddlebrook and for 2 weeks. My dad's like, well, to see how you like this training, it's gonna be tough. If you can, this is something you want to do, like then I'll support it. But I think he wanted me to get exposed and see, like, is this something you really want to do, kid? It's going to take a lot of time and practice. And what was I getting at with the calmness and stuff? Yeah, I just remember all the coaches saying, like, look, the best players, they lose points and they just move on to the next point. So it was almost like, I feel like in some ways it was not healthy coping, because then if you apply to too many things, it's not healthy, because then you don't feel what you're supposed to feel like in life, or you like compartmentalize too much. But I remember I got really good at, okay, I missed that. Let's next point. Okay. And then breathe and then like get grounded and like stay in the moment. So it's like that was gone. I wasn't always good at that, but I at some point got pretty good at just like moving on and
Do you
like
have
focusing.
a tip that works for you? I feel like I've practiced it really hard and definitely got better. But
Yeah.
I to this point, like I'm working on meditation now for about 2.5 years. But I
Wow.
still don't think I have the calmness at all situations that I would like to have. I even try to set intentions, and sometimes I get this crazy anger that just like, oh my God, and why am I angry? Because I know it's just hurting me. Like being
Right.
angry, it's no one else, but I'm suffering. So
Yeah. I mean, yeah. For me, it was always coping. I'm sure you can relate. I think you can relate. It's like if something was upsetting me or whatever, I'd go work out.
yeah, that's what I
And
did.
then I always felt
Yeah,
better after working out. Like if
right.
I was sad or something or mad, I remember I'd go do like an interval. But I mean, now you can't always like push yourself like that. That's the
Yeah.
thing. But I remember that was my go-to was like music. So music
Mhm.
was a huge mood booster, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
as for
Yeah.
everybody can relate to music. Music's always there. Listening to music, working out, getting a good sweat, and then I'd always feel better. I mean, that was my way of coping with when I'd be
Mhm.
angry or things like that. But if you're talking about on the court, I mean, again, I wasn't always perfect, but I do remember the biggest tips I think were helpful for me were the obvious like slow down because the most common thing is you rush and
Yeah.
then you could do more errors and you get more mad. It's this downward spiral that it's hard to reverse once you're really in it. So for me, I think a big breakthrough was when I learned to slow down in a match, just literally in between points, slowing down if I missed a shot, slowing down if I'm winning. Because sometimes I'd rush. I remember one time I was up 4-0 and like lost the match, and it was just like, what just happened? And I was so upset. But though it took those times losing like that to really learn how to handle it better and to dive into it to see what a good solution would be. So for me, it was slowing down and more specifically breathing, taking deep
Mhm.
breaths. That's what I remember a constant that several coaches would tell me. I'm like, what is this? What's up with this like breathing? And they're telling me to breathe. Like, what? Because it to me is just like, huh? But then yeah, it's like take a deep breath, take 3 deep breaths or whatever. And then so I started doing that one match. I'm like as I was bouncing the ball, and then I'm like, okay, I'm more calm. The other one, my go-to would be if I missed the point, I'd walk back to the fence and play with my strings. But as I was doing that, it was to take a few deep breaths to
Mhm.
slow down my nervous system or just slow down. I know it's like so simple, but that was huge for me. Just like literally taking the time to walk back, take a few deep breaths, reset. Then I would say the other big one was one time when a sports psychologist had come to talk or something like that. Another one was the visualizations, like we're talking about actually seeing yourself before your match. This is like before you even play the match. I would do this, like sometimes just sit and then envision how I'd be serving, how I'd be returning. That was a big, I think, game changer too. I actually did the visualizations. And then you come up with your rituals. You know, all tennis players can be quirky. You have your ritual, what you would
Yeah.
do. So that was like the string thing and the breathing. I had my specific, I always only bounce the ball 3 times when I serve. Those were calming rituals because you feel in control. But yeah, what else to calm? Going back to the sports psychologist, everyone knows this now, but to me that was like a big, like, oh wow, that's profound at the time because I was like 14 or 15. Just like focus on the process, not the outcome. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, who's this lady? I was like, oh, what? And then when she went to it, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because that was when I was starting to get too uptight about winning and losing. That was when I first realized like what choking was. And then I was having an issue with that for a little bit. And then that helped me overcome it. Then you still get nervous. So it's not that you don't feel the butterflies or the nerves, but it's in spite of that, you're able to direct your thoughts to instead of like, oh wow, this is a big point, it's game point, and if I win this, I go up 5-4 or I win the match. My thinking shifted to, I mean, it's obvious stuff, but I didn't know I was automatically going into like, oh my God, if I win this point, I would catch myself. The more you become aware, the more you like start catching yourself. Instead of saying that to myself, it became, okay, if I get a forehand, I'm going to hit this return middle, or if I get this backhand, I'm going to go cross court. So you focus on the process, and that helped me so like that was another big breakthrough. Even though it's again simple, it's like duh, common sense. But if you don't know, you get in an automatic mode when you're playing a match and you get so tight about winning, because you really care. You put all this time in. If I didn't care, then I wouldn't get tight. But it's finding the tools and a way to channel all of this energy you have. And that was like the biggest thing, is learning how to channel my anger, learning how to channel my thoughts or redirect them, because you don't fully control your thoughts, but you can redirect them. You can refocus. And that was like huge, I think, for me. I mean, for anyone, right? But when I started being able to do that in matches, I felt so much like a liberation, almost like, oh my gosh, I don't feel this horrible, icky feeling because like I'm choking, or if I did, I could brush it off. Like, okay, next point, it happened. Slowly over time, I was able to brush things off a little. It took practice. Like you said, it's practice. Doing it over and over again. And yeah, because I do remember the last few years of juniors, I played a lot of sets, practice matches. And it's surprising now to see like how many juniors don't even play practice matches. Like they train hard, but nothing substitutes playing a set, because that's what you're going to do in a tournament. And I remember that's what helped me too, is just, I literally played lots of sets during the week. But yeah, it's not easy. It's hard. It was easier than everybody would win. What tools helped you? Do you remember some like stuff like that, like tips?
Yeah, I think
slowing down.
Combination of all of you. I left the slowing down and wrote it down, because I don't know if necessarily someone told me to slow down. I had a similar, although slowing down, it's something actually I'm practicing even now as I get older, because I know I can go in such a speed and I can see kind of path and things evolving. And I
have to admit, me too. I tend to get caught up in the moment, and I got to slow down. I have to remind myself, because I have that habit too.
Yeah, I love the speed. Like the speed and pace gives me energy and just excitement.
Right. Yeah, it's exciting.
So the slowing down is actually something I practice a lot now. I had my breathing rituals for sure. I had just walk around the court. Sometime when I felt like really I needed more time, you hit the ball like off and you have to walk after to get more time. But it's definitely, I agree with you, the big game changer was, and I probably learned it the best in college when I was my first year. I felt like the difference of having back at the time Coach Wassmer, that he was our German coach. He wasn't with me the full first year, but he really knew how to talk to me. Something has changed in college. I felt like having the coach on, being able to be there on the court during those changeovers, it really helped me understand my thoughts that I'm having that are not productive, because he was he was more
having someone being able to be a mirror and be a mirror and call you out when it's happening, because it's different when it's after, like, okay, great, thanks, but
so that was really helpful during the matches, that allowed me to kind of see the difference. I still remember it's like this narrative, and I'm trying to figure out, well, I've learned a lot through tennis, and I'm taking everything I've learned in tennis into my life now. And I feel like going back to your basics, the process, like don't focus on the outcome, focus on the process. And the narrative, the story you have in your head is what's going to evolve and play out, right? So you can connect to visualization or anything. But the tennis, what I love about tennis, it's so black and white. And this is a perfect test I've done so many times, and all of tennis players probably done it. Right? You stand on the baseline, the serve is the only thing you have full control over, because there's no interruption. And you stand there right before you serve, and then you have a thought that says, holy cow, just don't double fault. And 99% of the time, you will double fault when you have the thought. So the thought of that is like, how do I control my thoughts to not have this thought, number one?
It's rewiring. It's completely rewiring. It's so hard.
But the two is that if this happens, how do I, to your point, rewire it to think about better? Well, whatever double fault, forget it. Erase it from the memory that the thought was ever there. And what do I have to focus on? What steps do I have to focus on? And how to break down the movement so I actually hit the serve I want to hit, where I want
you have to focus. Like focusing, you're better off thinking about, keep my left arm up or my right elbow up, than thinking, don't double fault. like something else.
It's the transfer motion, toss, elbow. Like everyone has their
legs.
Right?
Yeah. Something.
And the second big thing, and I don't know how I got this, if it was Coach Westmer as well or someone else, was I used to get super tense. I was like, I think there's people who are more natural competitors. I actually think you're a more natural competitor. For me, I was a natural trainer. I could run on the court and train hard for 8 hours, but once you put me in the match, I just get stressed and tense. So I had to learn a lot how to get loose and just get tight and actually play the game. I played so much better in practice than I ever played in the match. Like I was just trying to focus in the match to play as good as I could as I played in practice. That was my goal, just to do the same thing as when I played practice. And the thought of actually enjoying the moment that is stressful, like rewiring my brain to how do I enjoy this moment?
Yeah, you have to reframe it, right? The word, what a fun challenge instead of this is stressful. It's a challenge. But
I think the challenge is that's the exciting thing. So if you what really helped me is match point or set point or break point. This is the point I practiced my whole life for, right? So if you rewire it in a way, is those critical moments are the moments that you're actually looking forward to and are excited about. That point that really gave me a power to reframe my thoughts and play well. Like that's when oh my God, this is like the point that I'm super excited. And then I hit the serve that I needed to win in order to get back to deuce or to win the game and kind of move on, right?
Yeah, and then what you said, what you tell yourself, the story you tell yourself in that moment. I remember I didn't understand when coach was saying you just need to be more confident. I'm like, well, that's so unhelpful. Like looking back, I'm like, there were so many coaches that were so it's just so general and broad that I get that they were trying to help. But I'm like, that was more confusing. You just saying that. So then in my head, I'm like, oh wow, I'm not confident. Then that's what they're saying. So it became a complex. And it's more about focusing on, wow, I put the time in, reframing, I've practiced. That can allow me to be confident when I step on the court. It goes back to what you just said. It's a lot about how coaches talk to you and knowing the right words and how to frame things, because it can completely change everything, in your own head. There's lots to be said about that, about just the language used and what can build a player's confidence or destroy it.
Finding coaches and the right coach.
The right fit. Yeah, the right fit that you mesh. And because some people, it's true, we're all different. I did like to be pushed. I enjoyed that. I needed that. If the coach was too calm, which is funny because you said oh, you're so calm, but yeah, I was very, I guess maybe internally fired up. I don't know. I enjoyed the challenge. I like being pushed. I like the coach that yelled, not being mean. There were, like I said, I had some bad experience, flat out mean, bully, not cool coaches. But the coaches that were you knew they wanted you to do well and they were pushing you in a drill, come on, let's go. Come on, get it. Come on. But I like that being pushed. Some players didn't. Some players probably hate that. We're all so different.
I agree. It's very important, the fit. How do you find the right coach though? I think
that's do you have trial and error. Huh.
Through me, it's been trial and error, really. I don't know if there's a way. I wish there was something for coaches. Oh, this is, and maybe there is now.
We should do that. If there isn't that, we should have a platform that takes the coaches, their personality style, their communication style, everything, and then puts it into a category. Maybe that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be super interesting.
That would be really interesting to do, even just an experiment with that. I feel like in some ways the tennis and everything, because you're constantly trying to adapt your strategy, all this stuff, you do critically think and you do adapt more easily in some ways, in some areas of life. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting.
I think the change is pretty big. Maybe this is something I would like to test through my interviews. I think in tennis, you really learn that nothing is constant. You have to work every single point.
Something that worked in this point or this game oh shoot, now his forehands or her forehands on, or now wait, now she's making her backhand. Now I have to come up with a different strategy here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. So I think there's a lot that you build in understanding change, understanding that there's nothing lasts forever, and then kind of the grit that goes with it, that you have to continuously work and improve to either stay where you at or get better, because that's the goal you're chasing. So I think that definitely had a big influence on me, and I have it now even in business. Although I often wonder, is it because I have had so much in tennis, I can't almost tone it down? Like I can get very much into extremes. Like I wonder if that constant improvement.
Because you do become a little obsessed. You kind of have to be good. You do become obsessive to a degree with everything. Yeah.
The single-minded focus, right, that you have for 15 years or however long you play. Like, how do you then quit it and translate it to something else? Like, in some ways, like I was similar like you. I was so fed up when I finished, tennis, and I went through all of my 5 stages of grief.
Right. Oh yeah, I definitely like
when I was done. But now it's like, well, what am I gonna do now? And how am I? Everything I've learned, because I think tennis had taught me everything I know about my life. How do I take what I've learned and use it in a positive way now in sort of my second career? Yeah, how do I materialize on the trends and learn from the mistakes I may have done before, so I don't repeat the same ones over and over?
Right. So yeah, a lot about just life. I mean, just right we said though, like strategy, like that can be applied to anything in life. You're constantly being aware, noticing patterns, making adjustments, constant adjustments, recalibrating, refocusing. It's like everything. And then you have to let it go because it's the next point. That point's gone. It's just like life. Like you can't get that moment back. It's gone. It's life. So there's just so much that it's a microcosm to life in a way, like the game and the court.
Yeah, actually, the last sentence you just said, I think, totally describes my life and just my mindset. It's funny. I haven't realized, I don't know if I was born with it or did tennis shape us that way.
That's the bigger question.
You become a good tennis player because you have that mindset sort of from when you're young, but you don't realize it. Or does that mindset get trained by the hours and years and of repetition and just the game, playing the game?
I guess it's both.
Yeah, I agree. Someone needs to see the talent in you, right? And in order to just become good and be interested in it, you need to be able to sustain that from the beginning, which is a lot of technique and coordination. Yeah. So I think in some ways, to even be interested in the game, you must have it to some degree. Coordination. And obviously, as you train it, you improve in things, because it's just building habits, repetition, and building good habits.
Yeah, basically you condition it. Yeah, you build the habits. It is true though. That's the one constant in life, right?
Right.
Everything's always changing. Nothing's ever staying the same. I remember my dad saying that all the time when I was little. I remember my dad saying all the time when I was like 10, 11. I'm like, what is he saying? He's like, the only constant in life is change. And because he later in life did study a lot of metaphysics and all sorts of stuff. And I would just look at him like, huh? Because I was like 10, 11, like, what's my dad saying? Okay, whatever. But then later, like a year or 2 or 3 or 4, it popped in my head like, oh, he was right. The only constant in life is change. Like I remember that from like really early, him telling me all this. I was like, okay. When you go on, step on the court, you want to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be happy with yourself. If you tried your best, that's all you can do. Because I think I was like maybe driving a coach crazy about how obsessive I was getting. I'd get really affected if I lost. Like this is when I was having probably issues with losing or who knows. And I just remember like, because I was starting to get too obsessed about uptight or whatever. And then I started just reminding myself that I'm like, okay, he's right. Like, I'm just like the next time I play, like, I'm just going to try my best. And just like, that's all I can do. I can't be mad at myself. And then I remember another tactic, which I think a lot of people use now, only allowing yourself 30 minutes. You're allowed to be upset with yourself. But after that, that's like your time limit. Then you need to move on.
Yes.
Because it's not going to help you to wallow the whole freaking day because you lost.
Right.
Like I had to learn to do that because I remember the rest of the day I was like sad. After, let's say, a bad loss in a tournament, junior tournament, I was like upset the whole day.
Yeah.
And finally, until the coach was like, look, you can be mad, but after like 30 minutes or whatever, I came up with like, that's it, move on.
I agree. The focusing on the process and not the outcome. Really just doing your best. All I want to do is go on the court and just do my best. All I can ask from myself is to do the same as in practice. Because that's kind of what you train for, right? If I do the same thing as in practice, that would be a success. So that definitely helped, like anchoring or putting
exactly. That's how I felt. That was
into what performance should look like.
Yeah.
And I also actually, one of the tips that was sort of weird to me at the beginning, I remember, but really powerful at the end, was giving my opponent a credit.
Oh,
there's certain
very good. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. That was that took so much pressure off me.
Yeah.
That was another, I don't remember which coach, it was several, but yes, exactly. That really changed things. Cause then you're like, oh, okay, they did hit a good shot. It changes the whole vibe. That's a big one.
So there's few points like that you can influence, right? And you're like, well, that was excellent. And I couldn't get it no matter what I would have done. Just let it go and move on. So that was very freeing, actually, when I put that into practice and I understood that there is some level of just freedom and separating myself, because that's not under my control.
Yeah, I know that what you just said like really resonates with me. I remember that being a big help when I was playing tournaments and putting that into practice. I think we already covered that, but my dad, I remember saying like, you don't need two opponents out there. Like, cause one time I think I was getting mad and he's like, you already have one opponent across the net. If you get mad at yourself, now you have two opponents. That's tougher. I was like, oh shoot, he's right. Yeah, I'm not going to get mad at myself anymore on the court. That's stupid.
Sometimes it's very just normal and logical things, but when sometimes someone says them out loud, it just drills deeper down in your consciousness.
Yeah, because again, all this stuff we go, it's like, oh, duh, breathe, this, that. But again, when you're in the moment, you're playing and your adrenaline's going, it's easy to rush. It's easy to skip over a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's just natural, human nature. Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk soon again.